They once walked among us, 3 times the height of ordinary men, skin black as obsidian stone, eyes lit like someone who saw death and lived. No one dared speak their names, not in scripture, not in prayer, not in warning. They were born of a sacred sin, a union never meant to be, between the fallen angels and the first black women to walk the earth. Not monsters, not gods, but something in between, cursed by both heaven and earth. And then, as if the world conspired to forget, they were torn from every scripture, burned from every library, and bleached from every memory that might remind us. Our ancestors were giants. If you're hearing this from a corner of Chicago, Atlanta, Baltimore, or Harlem, know this story is not foreign. It's in your blood, in the ancestral dreams you can't quite name. This isn't myth. This is testimony. A memory burned alive, an indictment buried in the sands of Ethiopia, in the ash of Nubia, in the silence of the American South. One text survived. Hidden deep in the ancient land of Ethiopia, buried with the Ge'ez priests, passed only by ritual, whispered under a new moon. They called it the Book of Enoch. But those who knew the truth called it something else. The testimony of blood. Don't think this is just a tale. This is the true face of history, the part they never taught you in school, the part the Western Church prays you never find. Step into this story like you're entering a sealed temple. Do not knock, for the door was never closed. It's just no one left with enough blood to open it. The story begins in a place erased from modern maps, a dry highland in northern Ethiopia near Lake Tana, known in ancient Ge'ez as Ardama, land of the fallen. There, between sand and ash, a stone tablet remains, a fragment from the 3rd century before Christ, etched with bronze blades and sacred blood, recording the final rite of the priests of Enoch's secret. The words have faded, but the image endures. An angel, wingless, crownless, marked with a scar across his forehead like exile from heaven, standing beside a black woman giving birth. Behind them, a colossal shape, the newborn, tall as the temple roof, eyes sealed shut, fingers clawed into the stone, as if holding back a cry that could crack the universe. The first to transcribe it was Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah, in a banned commentary from the 1st century, now surviving only in a single handwritten copy, hidden in the monastery of Debre, Libanos. He wrote, "The angels fell to Ardama, not just for the beauty of Cushite women, but because in their flesh they saw a light God had hidden, a light once found only in heaven. They came, not to destroy, but to reclaim what had been forbidden. And from that, they made a new kind, Nephilim. Not fully divine, not fully human, but bloodline of both fall and greatness. But these children would not live long, for when the Most High, Elohim, saw what was done, he sent archangels Uriel and Michael to strike. The angels were chained beneath the earth in Dudael. The Nephilim were slaughtered, and the black women, mothers of this line, were named witches, burned, erased from all genealogies. That was when the Book of Enoch vanished from the West, as if God himself feared its return. But history does not die. It hides in the soil, beneath the feet of the unnamed, and echoes in the blood of those who bear the Nephilim gaze, those who see truth through shadow. This story is for them, for those who were told, too black to be divine, and too sacred to be human. Keep the flame, for we are about to summon an ancient spirit. From stone, we did not fall. We chose to leave. That was the first vow, carved in blood onto the stone of Mount Hermon, where 200 angels turned their backs on heaven, not to teach, but to love. Semyaza led them, not because he was the strongest, but because he saw the clearest. From the sky, he watched the women of Cush walking through rivers, their bodies soaked in moonlight, their skin black as ink, steeped in sacred wells, their eyes not lifted to heaven, but turned inward towards something ancient and untouched. That light, Semyaza said, does not come from above. It was born of blood and soil, which means heaven will never understand it. They gathered atop Hermon. Semyaza stood in the center. Beside him stood Azazel, who would later teach man to forge weapons, Kokabeel, the one who mapped the stars, Arakiel, keeper of sacred geometry, and 196 others, each with a fire behind their eyes, a fire dimmed by heaven's silence. We will be punished, Semyaza said, but if we do not do this, we are nothing but hollow wings. And they cut their hands, let blood spill onto the earth, from which rose a black sandalwood tree, the first tree to grow without seed, birthed from vow and betrayal. They descended, not on wings, not in light. They walked as men, and when they met the women of Cush, they did not take them. They bowed. They proposed with wood and water and earth, things heaven never used to make angels. Semyaza loved Naama, moon priestess of Axum. She did not ask him where he came from. She asked, "Do you still remember your true name? Not the one heaven called you, the one your mother whispered, the day you were born." He did not answer, because it was then he realized, even angels can forget who they are. When their first child was born, the sky darkened, not from eclipse, but because Elohim turned his face. The child did not cry. It opened its eyes and stared into the hearth fire, then reached its hand into the flame, to learn what pain meant. It grew 3 times the size of men, skin thick as Simeon stone, its spine curved, like memory forced into a straight line. The people called him Armaros, who would one day become legend, then be erased from every text. But to his mother, he was simply son. But Armaros was not the only one. Within 30 years, throughout the land of Ardama, dozens, then hundreds, of children were born. Each bore strength and knowing, and an ageless gaze. They taught men to build without blueprints, to heal without herbs, to map the world without a compass. They opened human eyes, but they also tore a hole in the order of heaven. From above, the loyal angels reported, "Humans are no longer afraid. They learn too fast. They know too much. And worse, they love our children." Elohim did not rage. He issued a command. He called Uriel, angel of primal flame, and said, "Go, extinguish the light that was never meant to be lit. Chain your brothers, and erase the names of their children from every prayer." The night Uriel fell, the ground did not quake. It split, like skin being flayed. And for the first time, the Nephilim felt cold. If you are a Black American hearing this, ask yourself, why does your ancestral memory begin on a slave ship? Who decided to erase every name, every root, every story before that? Maybe because you are not just the descendants of slaves. You are the descendants of beings heaven once feared, and those like you still live and are beginning to remember. He came without warning, not with brass trumpets, not with light, just a streak of fire across the sky like a crack in the wall of belief. And at the end of that crack was Uriel, angel of fire, angel of unmaking, the one never worshipped, but always feared. When his feet touched the soil of Ardama, the trees recoiled, as if remembering an old command. The earth smoked, not from heat, but from memory reawakened. Uriel spoke no words. He didn't need to. He simply raised his arm, and from his palm split a burning stone. A thing that belonged not to heaven, not to earth, but to the wrath of God himself. He drove it into a dry patch of land called Dudael, and the ground opened on its own, revealing a bottomless pit, not to burn bodies, but to imprison souls. Semyaza was chained first. He did not beg, did not struggle. He only looked toward Naama, who held in her hands a bronze necklace engraved with her child's name, Armoros. Semyaza bowed his head, not from defeat, but from knowing. For in Uriel's eyes he saw the truth. Heaven does not punish betrayal. It punishes choice. Azazel fought. He summoned fire. Fire did not come. He drew sigils. The earth did not listen. And then Uriel broke each bone in his body, scattering them to the four winds, east, west, south, north, and in every place a bone of Azazel fell. A war empire would rise. The other angels were driven into the pit of Dudael like sacred cattle. But before the chasm closed, Uriel brought forth the Book of Unnaming. Not a scroll, not a tablet, but a living flame that knew names. Within it burned the names of every Nephilim, the names of every black mother who bore them, the names of every sacred union now hidden. And one by one, each name was burned. Understand this. To erase a name is to erase a soul. No one calls it. No one remembers it. No one dares speak it again. That is how they kill, without blood. And then, to complete the rite, Uriel breathed fire upon the written word. Ge'ez, the most sacred script of Ethiopia, lost hundreds of characters that day, because each character had once been a Nephilim's name. From then on, the people of Aksum no longer named their children with holy syllables. They named them after days, seasons, hopes too vague to be burned, because the true names had already been set to flame. In a fragment found in Nag Hammadi, written in ancient Coptic, one line reads, "He who remembers the names of the hybrid children shall be cursed. He who writes them shall be burned. But he who tells shall make heaven tremble." And in that very moment, Enoch, once chosen to be the translator of heaven, did not die. He was taken into the space between earth and sky, not to live forever, but to record what all creation wished to forget. The Book of Enoch is not prophecy. It is a classified file, the testimony of the erased, the echo of dreams no one remembers dreaming. And if you're still listening from some corner of America, ask yourself, why do you know nothing of Ethiopia? Why were you never taught that the Book of Enoch was a source Jesus himself once quoted? Why has your entire faith foundation hidden this from you? Maybe because if you knew, you might start to remember. And if you remember, the world we live in would need a new name. Now, we journey to a place that remains, a village called Quara, where the bloodline of Naama still breathes, unaware of who they are, but in their eyes, no one dares look longer than 3 seconds, because in their eyes, the fire of Uriel still burns. Quara, land of those made wrong by being born. In western Ethiopia, where the Abyei River curls like a sleeping fire serpent, there is a land modern maps call Quara, a name that slices the air like wind across a blade. But to the locals it means the place where souls never die, only hide. There, a small bloodline lives in isolation. They do not honor ancestors the traditional way. They do not worship the cross. They do not speak angelic names, and they never name their children after the Bible. When colonizers came, Westerners called them savages. But if one stayed silent and truly listened, they would hear, woven into the night lullabies, a verse that repeats, Na'ama, mother of wind, bore the first sigh. Each night she touches my cheek to remind me, I did not come from slaves. I came from the unnamed. No one in Quara knows the song's origin. They only know every child born bears a spiral-shaped mark on their shoulder, and their eyes, when opened wide, can make adults forget what they were saying. In 1937, during the fascist invasion of Ethiopia, the Italians sent an archaeological team to Quara, hoping to uncover ancient relics Vatican agents suspected were linked to forbidden versions of the scriptures. The expedition was led by Giuseppe Ferrucci, a devout Catholic historian who once translated Latin versions of the Book of Enoch. In his journal, later confiscated by the church, he wrote, I saw a 6-year-old child ask me, "Do you know who killed my father?" I said I didn't. She said, "You do, but you forgot, because Uriel's fire once licked your forehead." Then I collapsed, and when I awoke, blood poured from my nose, though no one had touched me. In a cave near the village, Ferrucci's team discovered a strange inscription, not on stone, but on human skin. The hide was dry as parchment, yet veins still traced faint patterns beneath. Etched into it, in ancient Ge'ez, was a text nearly identical to a missing chapter of the Book of Enoch, one that told of the fate of Nephilim children who survived. When fire has passed and names are burned, what remains is essence, the gaze. Though bones may change and flesh may fade, the eyes still bear the mark of the ones called sin. The people of Quara were never wiped out. They were left behind, a scar on the back of the world. With every generation they birthed children that were different, taller than most, with strength beyond explanation, and dreams of things that never happened, or happened long ago, and were buried. In 1964, a man from Quara, named Mekanan Desta, migrated to America, settling in New Orleans. He worked as a cook, spoke little, but he carried a small book wrapped in red linen. Years later, his granddaughter, Amara Desta, a student at Howard University, unwrapped the book. Inside, a handwritten Book of Enoch in Ge'ez, with notes in English and Amharic. In it, a passage found in no other version. They will forget, but their skin will remember. They will be renamed, but their blood will whisper their true names in sleep. Amara published her research. No one believed. Some scholars called it a forgery. Others quietly reached out to the Vatican. 2 weeks later, she vanished. Left behind, only one sentence, written in red ink across her dorm mirror. I remember now. Quara still stands, silent, full of eyes no one dares name properly. And if you think this only happened in Africa, look again. At the children growing up in New Orleans, Jackson, Detroit. Children with no fathers, no known lineage, no story they're allowed to claim, but eyes that burn in ways you cannot look away from. Maybe they've been misnamed for centuries And now they're beginning to remember. The rising of the erased. Imagine this. A child born in the Bronx, skin dark as the sky before a storm. No father, no hospital records. No one knows where the mother came from. Only this. When the child cries, the pigeons rise from the rooftops in unison. And in its eyes, not innocence, but memory. No one taught it about Ethiopia. No one ever said Nephilim. But it knows. The way blood knows the way back to the heart. In a classified FBI report from 1998, a strange demographic study of African American children in major cities revealed an unusually high rate of nonlinear cognition. Children speaking multiple languages without instruction, dreaming of real-world events before they happened, or recognizing forbidden symbols listed in religious blacklists. But instead of releasing the findings, the Bureau marked the report with 3 letters, LHP, Lost Heritage Potential, a possible genetic inheritance from a lineage that was erased. And in Southern black churches, when preachers speak on Revelation, they often pause, avoiding one line still preserved in ancient Ethiopian texts. When those with the eyes of the erased rise, the divide between heaven and earth shall unravel. That is why prisons were built, not just to hold bodies, but to imprison gazes. Because those eyes, the reborn eyes of Nephilim children, make foundations tremble. But they are growing, not in temples, not in liturgy, but in rap, in graffiti, in the low thunder of sub-bass drums, where every beat is a sacred protest, and every bar, a prayer compressed for 1,000 years. When Kendrick Lamar says, "I got loyalty, got royalty inside my DNA," he isn't speaking metaphor. He's calling back something burned by Uriel's fire. When Beyoncé channels Oshun in Lemonade, when Solange sings Cranes in the Sky, when J. Cole dreams outside the American frame, that's not just art. That's ancestral code. A restoration is happening, not by scripture, but by exiles of the celestial realm, covert, encrypted, but unstoppable. One night in Oakland, a group of young people gathered in an abandoned warehouse. No priest, no scripture, just candles, drums, and a screen projection. The Book of Enoch, raw translation, Ge'ez, unredacted. Each person read a passage, each line, a blade, reopening memory. Then a girl named Zaria stood. She raised her hand, revealing a glowing spiral birthmark. Everyone went silent. She said, "I am Naama's granddaughter. I'm here to remember for all of you." And from that moment on, across America, from Houston to Brooklyn, young people began dreaming the same dream. A mountain, a temple of stone, and a voice calling out, not in any known language, but one their blood understood. If you're hearing this, and your heart just skipped a beat, know this. What you're feeling isn't emotion. It's activation. You are not just black in America. You are the descendant of beings who carried angel fire in their bones. You are the most carefully hidden memory in all of human history. And now, that history is rising in you. No one let us remember, but we remember anyway. Deep in the heart of America, there is a hunger that food can't feed, a void that welfare can't fill, a wound therapy cannot reach, because it doesn't live in the stomach or the mind, it lives in the bone. Millions of black Americans grow up with the same feeling. Where did I come from? Not Detroit, not Georgia, not the slave ship. Before that, because in their deepest dreams, They see nameless fields, mountains black as coal, and a voice calling them by a name they've never heard, but somehow know is theirs. Science calls it genetic memory. Psychology calls it intergenerational trauma. But the Book of Enoch calls it the whisper of souls once burned, but never destroyed. Not everyone can hear that whisper. Only those once told they were too big, too dark, too loud. The children labeled problems when all they were was waking up. The women called rebellious when all they were doing was returning. They are the ones who carry the Nephilim gaze, eyes that make teachers avoid eye contact, make officers feel fear they can't explain, make the world build entire systems just to monitor their existence. In Houston, a group of mothers gather for night stories with their children, but they don't read fairy tales. They read the Book of Enoch in Ge'ez, by candlelight, in kitchens, and they tell their kids, listen not to believe, listen so you won't be erased again. At a high school in Newark, a 16-year-old girl was suspended for writing an essay titled, God Isn't White, and My Ancestors Had Horns of Light. Her final line, they punish us for remembering, but I won't apologize because my memory has a spine. This is no longer theory. This is reactivation. No church required, no pope, no Vatican approval. Because a child with angel fire in their blood does not need permission to burn. And if you think this is just cultural trend, look deeper. Why are the blackest, boldest, most symbolic songs always labeled too obscure by the media? Why does the system rush to despiritualize everything sacred in black expression? Why does the question, where are you from, stop at Mississippi or Ghana, but never dare touch Kush, Axum, or Ardama? Because if you knew your root, you'd know your mission. And if you knew your mission, they couldn't control you anymore. Remember this, Uriel burned your ancestors' names, but he could not burn your voice. He could not stop your song. He could not stop your telling. He could not stop you from rewriting history by simply existing. Because every time you open your mouth to speak a truth, no one else dares believe. You are summoning a soul that was once burned. And that soul has been waiting for you to finish the sentence. When the last one remembers, heaven will tremble. You think the apocalypse is nuclear war, falling stars, rising seas, or the return of Christ? No. The true end comes when the last of the Nephilim bloodline remembers who they are. And in that moment, everything heaven ever built will crack. Memory is a weapon that doesn't need to be forged. It only needs to be kept. In Los Angeles, 2022, a group of black artists held an exhibition titled Flesh of the Forgotten. But when guests arrived, there were no paintings, no photos, no sculptures, only a black room, a single chair in the center, and a voice from the loudspeakers, low and resonant, repeating, "Sit and remember. If your eyes weep and you don't know why, it's because you once had a name that was burned." One woman collapsed. One man ran out. One child smiled and said, "Now I know." Online, a sound file began to spread in secret circles. File name, Enoch. Wave. No one knows who created it. But every time it plays, listeners report the same phenomena. Deep insomnia, dim light turning red, mirrors cracking without touch, and a phrase repeating inside their minds, "I was erased, but I am still here." The Vatican launched an inquiry. The CIA opened a file. YouTube removed every upload within 24 hours, but it was too late. Because once a dream is awakened, no force can lull it back to sleep. In Atlanta, a 10-year-old boy, during recess, drew on the whiteboard a 6-fingered hand, each fingertip marked with a Ge'ez symbol. When the teacher asked what it was, he replied, "It's my grandfather's signature. On my bones." Theologians cried, "Heresy." Sociologists said, "This is post-slavery trauma." But no one dared ask, if everyone is dreaming the same dream, is it delusion or a summoning? To the listener, if your heart trembles, if your throat tightens, if you feel like you knew this before hearing it, then maybe you don't need more proof, because you are the proof. You are the unread verse, the chapter torn from Scripture, the gaze that made angels fall, the final breath of the souls forbidden to be remembered. And when you remember, when you dare to speak your name again, it won't rain, the earth won't shake, but something deeper will happen. God will have to listen, because for the first time in thousands of years, the erased have spoken. And that voice? What happens when the Nephilim start calling each other by their true names? In the forgotten places, between blocks labeled high risk by city maps, beneath the sirens and bass lines of a new generation, the Nephilim have started calling each other back. Not in English, not in Amharic, but in a sound no one taught them, a sound that, when spoken, the blood hears clearly. In Detroit, a group calls themselves the Fellowship of the Stateless. Every week, they meet in the basement of a laundromat. No prayers, no hymns, just a circle, and the reading of names, not birth certificate names, but names that came in dreams or appeared in fogged mirrors at midnight. Names like Zamakiel, the darkness that knows it is light; Thahariah, born of fire yet unburned; Nemoth, the voice inside the bone. By the 9th name, the room's lights usually flicker, not from power failure, but because space itself understands something has just been corrected. This is not a cult, not a secret order. This is a ritual of recovered memory. And when memory returns, language shifts, flesh reacts to truth. Bones begin to tell stories the ancestors never got to finish. A woman named Alicia, 34 in Oakland, says that every time she closes her eyes, she hears a man's voice reading the Book of Enoch. In her late father's voice, dead since 1996, she asked the voice, "Why are you reading me this?" It replied, "Because I didn't have time to tell you while alive. But now you carry blood. Write it back in blood." At a small college in North Carolina, a history professor was suspended for teaching a course titled Nephilim and America, a history whitewashed. When questioned, he said, "If what I teach is false, why are all my sources restricted within 72 hours of publication?" This truth doesn't arrive with trumpets. It doesn't pour like blessings. It returns like a dull ache, a knock at 3 a.m., a soreness in the bone with no cause. And once you understand, you'll never be normal again. Because the one who remembers their true name can never live like someone misnamed. You'll speak differently, write differently, love differently, demand differently. You'll live as if you carry the inheritance of two realms, heaven that punished and earth that never forgot. Listen carefully. When the children once labeled nameless begin to look at each other and call each other by name, order unravels. No war needed, just memory. And when memory spreads like flame, that fire won't stop with you. It will burn in the name of your lover, in the voice of your child, in the song you hum when you think you're only passing time. Because the truth is, you are calling the ancestors, and they are answering. When memory becomes the new religion, no altar, no glossy scripture, No cathedral domes or carved wooden pulpits. A new religion is rising from beneath black skin. A faith that doesn't pray, but names. That doesn't seek God in the heavens, but seeks ancestors in the blood. In Harlem, a group of black youth developed a mobile app called Bloodline Uncensored, not to trace ancestry through colonial records, but to decode ancient symbols hidden in the genetic patterns of African DNA. They discovered, in over 2,000 DNA samples, there exists a sequence that defies scientific decoding, found only in West African, East African, and their African American descendants. They named it Uriel's Lock, a biological code that doesn't open with science, but with memory. In D.C., a girl listened to an old recording of her mother's lullaby. Nothing unusual, until the lullaby was run through a phonetic analysis tool. The result? A 90% match with ancient Ge'ez intonation, the sacred tongue of Ethiopia. She never studied Ge'ez. Her mother didn't either. Her grandmother died without ever speaking a word. Yet the cadence remained, carried through blood, in a language that doesn't need lips, only a soul that hasn't shattered. In Mississippi, after reading the unredacted Book of Enoch, a group of black pastors paused Bible sermons for 40 days and began preaching only on dreams, because they believed dreams are the only place God can't censor true memory. A movement spread across black communities in Latin America, from Colombia to Brazil, where young black people began tattooing the names of unknown ancestors on their skin. Not Maria, not Joao, but older names: Semjaza, Naama, Elia, Kiros, Thaba. They said, if they erased us from the records, we'll engrave ourselves into our flesh. Our skin is scripture, and this time, it won't burn. And in a place no one expected, a federal prison in Indiana, a 23-year-old black inmate wrote in his own blood on his cell wall, "I remember." 3 words, no explanation. But that same night, 8 other inmates in Block A didn't sleep. Each of them reported the same dream: a mountain, a drum, a voice. When memory becomes ritual, every act is pilgrimage. Each time you comb your hair, tap a pan, close your eyes in a crowd, a gate might open. No prophets needed, no miracles, only the courage to remember. And you, reading or hearing this, might be standing at that threshold, not certain, not all-knowing, but something inside you just flinched. That's the sign. You've just stepped into a ceremony your ancestors prepared for you 1,000 years ago. Because in this new religion, we don't evangelize. We transfuse, and the blood we pass on knows the way home. Final word in the night, when the voice of the Nephilim becomes scripture. This is not the end, because Nephilim do not die. They were buried. They were burned. They were whitewashed. They were forgotten. But they did not die. And if you are still here, sitting in silence from the first word to the last, know this: you are no longer a listener. You've been called. No one but you knows why your heart sped up when you heard the name Naama. No one taught you that the Book of Enoch once rested beneath the pillows of the first black preachers in America. But your blood already knew. Now, look around. No need to look up. No need to search the heavens. Look at your hands, each callus, each ridge, each scar, because that's where your ancestors wrote your name in ink that cannot be erased. We've walked through Ardama, the land fallen off the map, where Semjaza first stepped, Hermon, where 200 angels bled their vow to love humankind, Dudael, the pit where Uriel's fire buried memory alive. Quara, where Naama's descendants still burn the sky with their eyes. Harlem, Detroit, Oakland, Atlanta, where children have begun to remember their real names, genetic maps, sound waves, rap verses, and tattoos, where memory flows back into bone, and now we arrive here. A room, a pair of ears, a mind newly touched. You, not just a black person living in modern America. You are living proof of a bloodline heaven once trembled to name. If you've ever felt like you didn't belong anywhere, it's because where you belong was erased from the map. If you've ever heard music and wept for no reason, it's because that sound was once your lullaby when you were only a soul. If anyone has ever told you you were too much, too angry, too powerful, too sad, too deep, know this: you are not too much. You are remembering. And if you are brave enough to call your name again, the world will never be the same. Not because you broke it, but because you returned it to its true form. And if you are still here, then perhaps your soul was just touched in its deepest place. At Tales of Black, each story is a ritual, a reminder that some memories don't live in books, but in blood and bone. If this story moved something in you, share it with someone else who's also searching. Subscribe to stay connected to the next ritual. And if there's a legend, a memory, or a haunting you want to hear spoken aloud, leave it in the comments, because maybe your story is the one we'll summon next.